What's good, guys? Welcome to Fed by Fire. I'm Christian Whitlow. So first, let's talk about the Crown Hill Enterprise indictment that just dropped. So federal prosecutors are alleging that they just unraveled one of the biggest gang racketeering cases Indianapolis has seen in years, a 28-count federal indictment. It accuses 12 alleged members of what authorities call like we said earlier, the Crown Hill Enterprise. And they say they were running a violent criminal organization tied to things like murder, kidnapping, drug trafficking, arson, witness intimidation, and illegal firearms. But according to prosecutors, the organization allegedly operated from at least 11 different trap houses across Indianapolis between 2019 and 2024, distributing everything from H to Fetty, ice, while using violence to control territory and, as well as silence people who they thought could be cooperating with law enforcement. Federal officials claim that the members pistol whipped victims and shot a man over $40 at one point. So a $40 drug debt, and murdered another man after he allegedly slammed the door of a trap house just a little too hard. And they disrespected a gang female tied to the operation. That was another time. And one of the most disturbing allegations involves Molotov cocktails. Prosecutors say that gang members targeted a residence that was connected to someone that they believed spoke to police at some point after a search warrant hit one of their drug houses. And authorities claim that shots were fired and firebombs were thrown at the home as retaliation. Investigators also accused the enterprise of laundering their profits through fake business entities, designed to hide the drug money. Business as usual, something we talk about on this channel, something to disguise ownership and assets. During the raids tied to the investigation, law enforcement reportedly seized 35 firearms, drugs, cash, and even a machine gun conversion device. Federal agencies, including the FBI and the ATF, as well as local Indianapolis police, all worked hand in hand on this case to bring it together, describing this group as a violent enterprise that ruled neighborhoods through fear and intimidation. But where one goes, another comes. Now, the defendants face federal RICO-style charges that could carry decades in prison or life sentences if convicted. So let's go to case 2. Let's go to Tennessee, y'all. Let's talk about the execution that was halted. A Tennessee execution came to a dramatic and controversial stop after prison staff reportedly spent more than an hour attempting to find a vein for lethal injection. The failed execution attempt has, reigned national debates surrounding, the death penalty, wrongful convictions, and whether DNA evidence should be fully tested before executions are carried out. But the inmate at the center of the case is 57-year-old death row prisoner Tony Carruthers, who was convicted in connection to the 1994 murders of Marcellus Anderson, Delios Anderson, and Frederick Tucker. So 3 people. And what makes this case especially controversial is the lack of direct physical evidence that tied Carruthers to the killing. Prosecutors relied heavily on testimony from witnesses who claimed Carruthers confessed or discussed the murders with them at some point. And supporters argue that no DNA or fingerprint evidence has, conclusively linked him to the crime scene. But the case has recently gained national attention because Kim Kardashian publicly pushed for Tennessee officials to halt the execution until remaining forensic evidence can be tested. And advocates say that fingerprint analysis and DNA testing could potentially show multiple suspects were involved in this case. Something Carruthers himself has argued for years. Carruthers also, represented himself during portions of the legal proceedings, and that had something to do with what got him where he was at. But multiple conflict of interest with court-appointed lawyers is what made him eventually, appoint himself. Prevented him from receiving a fair trial, some say. After the failed execution attempt, critics of lethal injection say that the situation exposes continuing problems with, execution procedures in America. And opponents of the death penalty are now using the case as another example of why states should pause executions when unanswered forensic questions remain. So, for supporters of Carruthers, the central issue is simple. If untested evidence still exists, should the state, be allowed to carry out an irreversible punishment before every possible forensic test is complete? Let me know what y'all think in the comments. Now let's talk about the San Diego shooting. And it happened on May 18, 2026 at the Islamic Center of San Diego. I know it happened a while ago, but I wanted to cover it. So the largest mosque in San Diego County, authorities say two teenagers, 17-year-old Kane Clark and 18-year-old Caleb Vasquez, carried out what investigators are now treating as a hate-motivated mass shooting before ultimately unaliving themselves. And according to investigators, the two suspects arrived heavily armed with rifles, handguns, tactical gear, and body armor. Police say that they opened fire outside the mosque during a busy time when families and children, were present on the property. 3 men were killed trying to protect others and stop the attack. Those victims, were identified as security guard Amin Abdullah Manzoor Kaza and Nadir Awad. Community members have since described them as heroes, and I do too, because, they helped buy time for people inside the mosque and, so they could lock down and escape. I don't care what religion you are, this is sad. And authorities say that the shooters were radicalized online and appeared obsessed with previous mass shooters and extremist ideology. Investigators reportedly recovered manifesto, Nazi imagery, extremist writings, as well as live stream footage that was connected to the attack. Multiple reports say the suspects idealized previous killers, including, the crisscross mosque shooter, and attempted to copy aspects of other mosque shootings. One of the biggest questions that people have started asking, though, afterwards was whether, warning signs were clear with these guys. Missed reports revealed, police had previously responded to concerns involving one of the suspects. and, guns inside of his home. One suspect's mother even connected police shortly before the attack, saying that her son was, talking about unaliving himself, and weapons were missing from the house. Investigators later recovered dozens of firearms connected to the suspects and their families. And this paints a crazy broad picture. The shooting also sparked, national conversations about online radicalization, hate crimes, and gun access. Also, security at religious institutions, Muslim organizations say anti-Muslim threats and harassment have increased nationwide over the last several years, especially online, and federal investigators, including the FBI, are continuing to investigate the attack as a hate crime, because that's what it was, and a terrorism-related event. In the aftermath, though, thousands showed up to gather for visuals and funeral services, and I pray for the families that were involved. This paints a crazy picture for families all around the country, because at least where I am here in Virginia, a lot of families, how they were raised, there's guns in the home. And, a lot of kids I went to school with, they're raised up shooting. And, they say that there was warning signs with one of the suspects. And, these people got to think back. But, when you see something, say something, that's what it goes back to. I had an awesome day at work yesterday, and today everything's going great. I'm happy, I'm blessed that I can feed my family, and that, my recovery has helped me get this far. And, with nothing really, earth-shattering being there to talk about. So, I thought we'd go over some headlines like we just did. As always, I'm happy to be here with you guys. I'm happy for every viewer, every subscriber. Go ahead and like. And also, I wanted to show off my The Real Pred Hunters shirt came today. So, I am happy about that. It was my anniversary gift after 13 years with my wife. But, yeah. Shout out to everybody. I got a lot more videos coming. If you have a story about recovery, crime, law enforcement, and you want to get it out there, hit me up. Let's do a video. I'm looking for guests. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.